So our online master program is fully online, and it consists of 13 courses. So you can choose any courses from spring semester and also autumn semester. And this masterclass is a teaser from one of our course. It's called offshore wind farm planning. And if you can choose 9 courses from the program, and after you complete 9 courses and one final project, you will get Master of Green Energy degree, and the workload can be spread over 2 to 6 years. And of course, you are welcome to choose only one single course that you are interested without completing the full program, and you can decide later if that's the case. Just some information about the program, the participant. So our main target participant is someone like you, maybe who are already in the wind industry and want to move up their career to the next level, or someone in another industry like oil and gas who want to transition into the renewable sector. As you can see from the map, we have participants across all the countries, and so far we have more than 1,100 courses has been completed since we have this program. And our courses are mainly application focused, so that means it's not really research-based program, so it's more tailored for people full-time working, and also and it's a quite flexible program. So basically, you watch some pre-recorded videos and attend the Q&A sections once a week, and it's purely online, and it's flexible from it's aiming for the full-time professionals. So we still have some offering in the spring semester. So if you have further questions about the program and about the question, you're welcome to contact Learn for Life. So that's enough about the program. Niels Erik, if you're ready, maybe you can share your screen. Let me stop sharing. By the way, this webinar will be recorded. So if yeah, just let you guys know.
So can you see my slides, Alan?
Yes. But it's not in. Now it's good.
Now it's full screen.
Yes.
And you hear me as well?
Yes, down here.
Great, perfect. So welcome everyone to this masterclass on offshore wind farm planning. My name is Niels Erik Clausen, and I'm an associate professor at DTU Wind and Energy Systems. So this masterclass will take you through some of the main steps of this course, but also looking a little bit ahead. So, but first, a few words about myself. I'm a mechanical engineer from DTU, and I also took a PhD from DTU. And after that, I spent 15 years in different private companies working with different energy-related issues, some of them renewable energy, but some of them not so renewable in terms of diesel power plants in developing countries. After that, I joined Risø National Laboratory 25 years ago and started doing wind energy research, consultancy, and later on also teaching. So I have worked with project development of land-based and offshore wind farms in many different countries. In 2008, I took up teaching in the planning and development course, which is part of our 2-year master program that we have here at DTU, a master program in wind energy. And we also have 2 other master programs, one in sustainable energy systems and another one in sustainable energy technologies. And they are full-time study programs. So you need to be in Denmark to follow those. In 2023, I started developing this offshore wind farm planning course, which is a part-time course, and it's part of the continued education program that Alan just introduced to you. My research area is planning and development of wind farms, environmental impact and social acceptability, and sustainability of wind energy technology and supply chain aspects as well. So that was a few words about myself. The agenda for today is that I will give you a little bit of a teaser, as Alan said, of the course called Offshore Wind Farm Planning. And I will do that by, let's say, taking some snapshots that we cover in more detail in the course. So you might think that, wow, this is interesting. I would like to hear more. Yes, that's fine. Then hope that we can see you in spring. Because I will give you an overview of the course. I will also touch a little bit about marine spatial planning, environmental impact, and how we plan offshore wind farms. I will have some examples from Denmark, but also from abroad. And finally, we will take a look at some trends that is, let's say, for the time being in the offshore wind business, especially with planning related issues. So the course is called Offshore Wind Farm Planning, and it is an introductory course. So it means if you have worked 5 years as a project manager with offshore wind farm planning, you might find that this is too simple. I think it's mostly suited if you are new to this or if you have, let's say, less than 2 years experience in this particular subject. But it's in reality, it's up to you. You are very welcome also, and if I can also say that later, that if you have questions related to this particular course, to send me an email, and my email will be on the last slide. But we are covering in the course both bottom fixed and floating wind farms. And how do we develop these wind farms? Of course, we need to look into the wind resource. How good is the wind resource at the place that we are having in mind? What are the site conditions apart from the wind resource, sea bottom, extreme winds, turbulence, risk of typhoons, risk of earthquakes, maybe even risk of icing on blades. So there are many different site conditions that we need to check. Then we need to select the most suitable wind turbine for the site. And often we compare different alternatives. We also need a grid connection. And this is also included in the course. We have 1 or 2 lectures on how to do the grid connection. We also have a couple of lectures on offshore wind farm economics. How do we estimate the economic, how the levelized cost of electricity, and as well as key characteristics like NPV and IRR, or things like that. Then we go through environmental impact of offshore wind farms and some societal challenges. I'm the course responsible, and I have with me 7 teachers with different backgrounds and expertise in each of their areas. For instance, I have an economist covering economics, an electrical engineer covering grid connection, etc., etc. So it's the specialist that you will meet in the course. Here we have some of the modules from the course. You can see we start by introducing the technology that we're utilizing. First, the bottom-mounted technology, then floating wind technology. Then we look with 2 lectures in the wind resource, because this is really important. You need to have a good knowledge about your wind resource in order to convince the bank that this is worthwhile financing. Site assessment is also covered in 1 lecture, offshore grid connection and energy islands. We have 1 lecture on that. Environmental impact assessment, that's me covering that. Societal considerations, it's a very experienced colleague of mine covering that. Onshore impacts is also covered by David Rudolph, my colleague. And then we look at offshore wind economics and support systems and how to carry out auctions. And finally, we have a guest lecture from the industry, changing from year to year, usually somebody with experience from operations of offshore wind farms or asset management. At least that has been like that for the past couple of years. During the course, we have some smaller activities included throughout the course, some small assignments. But the main assignment is simply that you develop a wind farm, an offshore wind farm in a country you know well. It could be your own country, or it could be the country you live in, or it could be the country that your company is about to develop an offshore wind farm. This will prepare you for working in that particular country. So you will work on that in groups of 2, and I will create the groups so that the time difference between the 2 of you will not be too much, so you can actually meet online and work on the assignment. Finally, at the end of the course, you will hand in a report documenting the analysis of your analysis. And finally, we'll do an online oral exam where you present your key findings. We will ask you some questions, and you'll get some feedback and a grade. And the course starts the 2nd of February next year. It would be great to see you there. Now, let's take a little look at what we do when we say we want to plan an offshore wind farm. I have tried to collect everything in one slide, and this is what you see here. If we start from the left side, I see if I can find my pen. No, there should be a laser pen somewhere. Yes, here it is. Can you see my laser pen now? This is the anemometer. So it is symbolizing that we are studying the wind climate. We do that either by measuring the wind speed by, for instance, a floating lidar. And we will also talk a little bit about that in the course. Perhaps if it is close to shore, we could also have an anemometer placed on a mast, but we don't use that so much anymore. Then we find a site. In this case, this is an online, an onshore site, but normally, of course, in this course, it will be offshore. Then we study who is using the site today. And I have symbolized that with this bird here, but it's also human beings. It could be fishermen, it could be gravel extraction, could be many different things. It could be a well-known diving site or anything. Who is using the site today? We need to know that to assess the impact on environment. Then we have public meetings in order to find out what is the opinion about the project? How can we create value for society? You might think that this is not needed because the wind farm is offshore. However, we have touch points with land where we have the grid connection, and also where we have the construction harbor and the O&M harbor. So we have 3 touch points on land, and it's very important that the population on land have a very positive impression about our project before we start construction. Down here in the corner, you can see symbolized by these high voltage transmission lines, we need to find a good point for our grid connection. Then we move on to selecting the best possible wind turbines. And finally, this spreadsheet down here, we try to calculate an investment calculation, O&M calculation, and find out if we can actually make money on this. Often we cannot, so we have to take one more round, improve the site, talk to people, choose a better turbine, maybe a closer grid connection, so the investment in the grid connection is not as large. And then we take a couple of iterations until we have black numbers and make profit of our investment. So this is, in one slide, the essence of the course. Let's dive a little bit into some of the aspects, the most important aspects, starting by the first one. This is a photo from the Global Wind Atlas that we are going to use in the course a lot to find out wind resources. This is from a project I worked on in the Black Sea, off the coast of Bulgaria. And you can see that the wind resource, this color means to 7.5 meters per second. So it's a relatively good wind resource. Compared to the North Sea, it is not as good, but still fine. In the Global Wind Atlas, we can also take the bathymetry, the water depth, and you can see that the masking, the black line here, means 1,500 meters water depth. And over here, you can see that the dark blue here is 50 meters. So this is already here. We have 50 meters of water depth. Here we have 1,500 meters water depth. So you can see very quickly we will have to move to floating wind in the Black Sea. And this is also why we don't have so many offshore wind farms in the Black Sea yet. I think the first project in Romania is being developed at the moment. This is also information available in the Global Wind Atlas. So then ports. We need to find out which port can we use as construction port. This is a photo from the port of Esbjerg in Denmark. And you can see that you need a lot of space for storage of components before they are actually shipped offshore. Here we have blades, we have nacelles, we have towers on storage, and here they are prepared for shipment offshore with this kind of specialized vessels that will erect the wind turbines offshore. So we need a large port for this kind of thing, and then we can use the same port for the base for the O&M vessels, or we can use sometimes a smaller port. 4 quick key questions that we need to answer when we do the development of an offshore wind farms. And this is the questions that I have selected here, but we go over them in much more details, of course, in the course. First question, where should our wind farm be placed? How large should it be? What should the layout look like? And then finally, the choice of wind turbines. And then further down, as you will remember, we also address questions like environmental impact, societal impact, and economics. But let's just look at these 4 questions, because when you have answered them, you have a good start. So you might think when you're standing at the coast, this is a photo from the coast somewhere. I don't think it's Denmark, actually. I think it's another place I have visited. And you're looking over the sea and you think, wow, this is a lot of space there. I can place the wind farm almost anywhere. That is not the case. There are many stakeholders when you start placing your offshore wind farms off the shore of your country. And that's why we do spatial planning. We do marine spatial planning. We have done spatial planning on land for many years in most countries. And recently, I think since 1990 or so, we have also been doing marine spatial planning. It all started in Australia in around 1980s or 1990s, where they wanted to do a spatial plan of the area off the coast of Queensland, because this is where we have the Great Barrier Reef, where there was a lot of ideas for mining of different things, of exploration of various goods. But there was also very strong forces wanting to explore or to maintain it as a tourist attraction. So they started doing marine spatial planning, where they actually got information about plans for transportation, renewable energy, marine conservation and protection, sand and gravel mining, commercial fishery, aquaculture, oil and gas mining, military and defense interest, etc., etc. There are more than 20 or 30 different stakeholders that would like to use the sea for something useful or economical. So they all feed in their wishes for areas that they would very much like to use, and a marine spatial plan is created. It's a very lengthy process. In Denmark, this process has taken 2-3 years to create the first draft of a marine spatial plan. And this one you can see here. This is marine spatial plan for Denmark that was issued in 2023, which was actually more than 25 years after the first offshore wind farm was developed in Denmark. In some countries, they have done the marine spatial plan early, but in Denmark, we did it actually quite late. So here you see the marine spatial plan of more than 100,000 square kilometers. That is the exclusive economic zone around Denmark. In this part, in the western part, we have the oil and gas activities located, and then we have a lot of shipping routes, and we have then offshore wind farms scattered around here and there. I have a slide later on showing that. But you can see that we have cable corridors, transit pipelines, excavation, protective measures for aviation, etc. There's many and nature and environmental protection areas. And this Marine Spatial Plan is publicly available here at this link, howplan.dk, and it's available both in Danish and in English. And it's being regularly updated. So here you can see I have clicked on the shipping corridors as shown here. So you can see that the location of Denmark between the Baltic Sea here to the east and the North Sea here to the west means that we have a lot of traffic in the inner Danish waters around here. This is the shipping corridors. Two of them are international. There's an international shipping corridor here between Denmark and Sweden. And inside here in the inner Danish waters, this is also international navigation route. And this means that we cannot place an offshore wind farms in the middle of this international shipping route without asking all the countries that is part of this international treaty, which means no-go. This is no-go areas. But here outside the international shipping routes, perhaps. So this is how we use marine spatial plans. We use it as a screening tool, not as a final tool for deciding the location, but we use it to find possible locations. And then we investigate them even further. And this you're also going to do in the wind farm planning course. You're going to develop a number of options, and you're going to discuss pros and cons for each of them and argue why the one you have selected is the best one. This is the Marine Spatial Plan for the German part of the North Sea. So here you see the coast, the west coast of Denmark, and here you see Schleswig-Holstein, and Germany is down here. And this part of the German part of the North Sea is much, much smaller than the Danish part of the North Sea. And this is why Germany already in 2009 developed the first version of their Marine Spatial Plan of the North Sea. They also have one for their part of the Baltic Sea. This is the 2021 edition of the Spatial Plan of the North Sea. And you can see I have shown here wind energy is shown with this color. This is priority areas, and then we have some reservation areas out here, possibly being used later on for offshore wind. But they have also quite large areas for nature conservation. This is the green area here that they have reserved for nature conservations. And the lines you've shown here is either navigation routes, or it could be protected routes where we have some pipelines in the seabed that we do not want that somebody else is touching. So, and that's why there's a safety zone around these pipelines. So when we have found some possible analysis, some possible areas that we would like to investigate more, we start doing a more detailed analysis of the locations. I have shown three aspects of that, and there are many more aspects that we need to look into. If we start from the left, a good way of starting is to find out where do we have existing plans or existing offshore wind farms. And this can be found in this 4C offshore, and there's a link here. You can see in the unpaid version, you can see where the wind farms are located, but if you want details about each of the offshore wind farms, there's a paywall that you need to pass. In the middle here, you can see this is from Protected Planet. You can see some areas that are protected for various reasons. And this is publicly available, and you can see where can we actually place wind farms. This is the inner Danish waters. Over here, you can see from marinetraffic.com, you can see the navigation routes, and you can see the more red it is, the more busy it is. Here we have placed a green triangle here, which is the green possible location for an offshore wind farms. So that is not in conflict with either this or those or these. So this is a place that seems to be available, and then we need to look more into How does the sea bottom look like? What does the wind resource look like? Is there a gravel extraction, etc., etc.? Many more questions needs to be answered. This is just to illustrate the methodology. Then we need to find out how big should your wind farm be, determining the size constraints with respect to available area, the situation of the power system, how big of an offshore wind farm can we actually connect to our power system, both now and in the future? What is the available technology? What are the environmental constraints, institution and supply chain capacity, and other constraints? So ideally, you might want to make an economic and financial optimum, both for society and for the investors in the wind farm. Somehow the wind farm should fit in society. So it's not a good idea to place a 1 gigawatt wind farm close to a very small island and vice versa. So somehow it should fit to the scale of the country and the location. Then you develop some alternatives and compare those layouts based on wind energy production estimation, AEP, and we will also teach you how to do that. First as a budget, and later on you can also do it in a more, let's say, accurate way. But and this is touched upon also in the course. Then look for various alternatives for grid connection and do cost estimations of that, distance to grid connection points on land, environmental impact analysis, and in cost benefit analysis for the society. Then we look into the wind turbine type and expected lifetime, and we do an estimation of the turbulence and extreme winds. We look at various types of foundations, and you will make a recommendation on which type of foundation you think is the most appropriate. We also look at a place for placing the O&M facilities, and here the distance to shore should not be too long, ideally. Then we look for a harbor, construction harbor, with a lot of space for all the parts that you need to store there. And if it is a weak grid, perhaps we need to do some power system performance modeling. This is, however, beyond the content of this offshore wind farm planning course. But you just need to know that in some cases we do need to do modeling of the grid. And then we do a cost estimation, investment cost, OPEX cost, and a financial analysis. This is an example from Denmark. We have two types of projects. We have open door projects and we have government tender projects. This is just to illustrate that you also need to look into the planning framework in your assignment. So if we start by the government tender project, this is the government initiative. This is being used by most countries in Europe and also outside Europe, for instance, in Taiwan and in the US. And here, the government will authorize the administration to do a tender where different developers can bid for the project. The support will then be decided by tendering, typically a pre-qualification round, and the lowest bid will win. In Denmark, we will have typically a number of dialogue meetings with the developers, and the grid connection will typically be paid either partly or fully by our TSO Energinet DK. In the early days, we also had open door project, and some countries also have that still. And here the initiative is by the developer, and the price will be market price of electricity. The grid connection will be paid by the developer. And in Denmark, if it is in Denmark, the developer has to offer 20% of shares to the local community. There is a possibility that you will have to pay compensation for loss of property value if it is a nearshore project, and municipalities can object to a location closer than 15 kilometers. And this is just the kind of open door scheme that we have in Denmark. And by the way, we are trying to not continue this. It's very, very difficult to get through with this kind of project for the time being. The licenses you need for construction in Denmark is 3. First of all, you need a license to carry out preliminary investigations. And by that, I mean mid-ocean studies, geophysical studies of the seabed, as well as wave climate and wind climate. And environmental impact assessment you also need to do. If it is an open door project, it's done by the developer. If it is a tender project, it's done by our TSO. Then you get a license to carry out the preliminary investigations, which is typically valid for 1 year, where you carry out these studies. And then when the government, when the authorities are happy with the result of these preliminary investigations, you can apply for a license to establish the offshore wind farm. When the offshore wind farm then has been constructed, you need to apply again, and this time for a license to exploit wind power and sell electricity to the grid. This will typically be valid for 25 or 30 years with a possibility of 5 years extension. In Denmark, we have what we call a one-stop shop, which means that the contractor will mostly contact the Danish Energy Agency, that will then contact all the other stakeholders we have in Denmark, including NGOs and the public. And as a contractor, this actually makes it a little bit easier to work around in the development phase. You still need to contact a few more yourself as a developer. Among others, you need to contact the military because they don't want to be coordinated by the Danish Energy Agency. So here you see the existing as well as wind farms being developed. So we have 17 wind farms constructed in the sea around Denmark, both here on the west coast of Denmark. We have here on the inner Danish waters, and we have here on the east side of Denmark, and the one close to the island of Bornholm as well. And we have also Nysted and Åsand 2 down here. So totally 17 wind farms either in operation or in the pipeline on being developed and constructed. This one, Thor, is under construction for the time being and will enter in full operation in 2027, at the end of 27, mostly we expect. So here you see, this is a slide from the Danish Energy Agency. The first offshore wind farm was developed in Vindeby in 1991, and it was actually decommissioned in 2017, in September 2017. And today we have 2.6 gigawatt offshore wind farm capacity in Denmark. We are expecting 7.4 by 2034 and 35 gigawatts in 2050. Soon we will have a tender out for 3 gigawatts to be constructed to be ready in 2033 or 34. And the next step is that there will also be some energy island projects being developed, perhaps. So you can see we are planning a very rapid step up here. So let's see if that actually will happen so fast. Time will show. Here's a little bit about environmental impact assessment. The EIA process is a process by which an assessment of the impact of a planned activity on the environment is carried out. The product is an EIA report, and we do that by comparing the situation before the wind farm was added and after. And the process was developed in the late 1960s in the United States by the US government, and now it's spread to the rest of the world and is implemented in the legislation in more than 160 countries over the past 35 years. This is the front page of an EIA report for Anholt offshore wind farm in Denmark. The main steps is that we describe the environment as it is. Then we describe the project and the expected impact. And finally, we discuss the impact and suggest mitigation measures, which means how can we actually decrease the impact. When we do that, we distinguish between 3 phases: construction phase, operation phase, and demolition phase. In the construction phase, we have piling monopiles. We have a photo down here showing the piling process. This is very noisy and can also harm the hearing of the marine mammals. So that's why it's something that is heavily regulated. But there's also a lot of traffic in the area, and we are studying the type of ships, their emissions, how many hours are they active there, and it has quite a lot of impact on the environment during the construction phase. In the operation phase, the timing is longer. The wind turbines will be visible. They will create some noise, and there will also be traffic now and then when the service people are visiting the wind farm. Then we have the demolition phase, which is in a way the construction in reverse, where we decide what to do with all the parts that we take down from the site, either recycling or landfill. The principle we apply when we estimate the environmental impact assessment is that, first of all, and that's the first principle, is that we try to avoid any impact. If we cannot avoid any impact by placing the wind farm a different place, we try to reduce it as much as possible. And if we can also not reduce it significantly or enough, we might have to go to the third option, which is compensate. This is something that we sometimes use where we have to cut some trees on land, or it could also be offshore that we are destroying an area. Then we will have to re-establish that kind of area another place, and even more than when we took down. So that's the three principles that we apply in that order. So here you see the typical table of contents of an EIA report: description of the project, description of alternatives, description of the environment, description of the impact, mitigation measures, monitoring program, what are we going to monitor after the project has been put into operation, and then finally a non-technical summary and a listing of topics not covered and a long reference list. Typically, this could be several pages of references. The EIA report itself is written in the language of the country, because it should be possible for everybody, all citizens of the country, to read the EIA report. They are always public. So here are some issues: pile driving noise and marine mammals. This is one of the important issues that we have to look into, because pile driving emits very high underwater sound levels. There's a risk of injury to hearing of marine mammals, and it can be heard over distances more than 20 kilometers. So there will be usually a lot of restrictions to construction. Mostly harbor properties are affected by this. What can we do about it? We can have non-piling foundations, for instance, gravity foundations, if the water is not too deep. We can have noise regulations. We can scare the animals away, and we can start slowly by hammering. Or we can apply bubble curtains like you can see up here. So this is a ring of bubbles formed around the platform that is doing the piling. This is very expensive things. So typically for a project, it could cause an additional cost of 50 to 100 million Danish kroner. There's also a risk of delays during construction, where the cost could easily be 2 million Danish kroner per day for each day of delay. Displacement of seabirds is another important thing that we have to look into, because some bird species don't like human beings and offshore wind farms. And this could be serious because they could lose an important feeding habitat. And it's also a cumulative impact issue, which means that if we have more offshore wind farms in the same area, it will become even worse. Some species are more vulnerable than others. For instance, common scooters, this black duck here, and red-throated divers, this bird flying here. This has to be dealt with in the planning phase, because once the wind farm is there, it's difficult to move it again. Implications is that large wind farm projects have actually been stopped and given up. In Denmark, we have had nearshore projects that were limited in numbers, and some nearshore projects, the area of some of those projects have been reduced. So this has definitely had some impact. Collision risk. This is the issue that birds flying at rotor height could be colliding with the rotor of the wind turbine. However, most birds fly around, but not all. For instance, cranes, raptors, some seabirds, they are more vulnerable to this issue than others. It could be an interesting idea to have seasonal restrictions when we have migration in spring and autumn. You could, for some short period, we could stop the turbines if needed. We could also create some corridors in the layout for migrating birds. In reality, this is a single species issue and it's not so important as the previous one where we displace huge amounts of birds, but it's still important. We need to do our planning properly, and we need to make sure that we are not impacting the flora and fauna seriously. But so far, no project have been given up based on collision risks. Here we have a photo from the Environmental Impact Environment Agency of the EU, and you can see that the more dark, the more the effects of human activities is on the offshore environment. And you can see that most of the North Sea and the Baltic Sea is actually already quite affected by human activities. The more brown it is, the higher the effect is. And this is the southern part of the North Sea, is the shallow area of the North Sea, exactly the area where we want to use that for construction of offshore wind farms. So, and here you can see the impacts. What are the impacts like? Hazardous substances, bycatch of bottom touching mobile gears, extraction of species of commercial fishing, and bycatch by pelagic towing gears. Fortunately, the impact that we get from offshore wind are not one of those that are so serious, but some of them are still input of continuous anthropogenic sound. Yes, noise, we can create that. Physical loss of seabed, yes, we will also take up some space on the seabed, etc., etc. But fortunately, the combined effect of offshore wind and the environmental pressure that we already had on the North Sea is not the same issues up here. If you want to know more, you can find the report down here. There's a reference. Now, what is the research areas that we have today? First of all, we are having a lot of research going on with marine mammals and piling, especially harbor purposes. We want to develop methods where we can construct offshore wind farms without harming our marine mammals. We also have some studies ongoing on bird avoidance studies. How can we avoid collisions between seabirds and offshore wind farms? And there's also studies going on displacement. Recently, we have started studies also on impact on birds and especially bats, on detection of those and how can we scare them away so they are not colliding with our offshore wind farms. We have a number of biodiversity studies ongoing, and we are also studying the impact from decommissioning activities, because this is something that we have just started in Denmark and in Sweden. Otherwise, other countries have not decommissioned. Well, there's one in UK as well. Otherwise, decommissioning of offshore wind farms is something that is really, really new. Recently, we published a paper where we actually reviewed the literature that was available on impact of offshore wind farms on ecosystems. We did a systematic review and published some results. It's published earlier this year. What we found there was that 75% of all published information is from the North Sea. So if you're going to construct offshore wind farms elsewhere, you will have to start with the experience from the North Sea if you want to look in the literature, and then you have to publish information also from other sea basins to supplement this. But unfortunately, there's most information available from the North Sea because this is where we've had the early start. A summary, the most important issues offshore is visual impact, especially close to shore, navigation, mammals, birds, and commercial fishery. The list is longer, but this is the 4 issues that I think that you should never forget. Some points to take home. In this class, we have briefly explored what is a good location for an offshore wind farm. How can we optimize the layout of the wind farm? We haven't touched so much about that, but it's of course about minimizing the visual impact by creating a layout that is not so visible, putting it further away, but also making the layout so that the impact is less, and at the same time optimizing the AEP, annual energy production of the wind farm. Can we avoid harming the environment? The short answer is most likely no, but we can minimize it. And we have to do that in an intelligent way. Can we build an offshore wind farm and increase biodiversity? Yes, we can. And this is possible. There's a number of examples recently where we can actually make biodiversity and offshore wind farms walk hand in hand. How do we provide value for local society? This is something that we will also study in the course, and this has to do with sometimes creating some bonus programs for the people living on land that can actually see the wind farm, and so that they also get some value from the construction activities. Very important issues also to be aware of. All right, I think this is what I had in mind for as an appetizer of this course. So here you see my email, and now it's time to answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Niels Erik, for the very interesting presentation. And I can see there are many questions in the Q&A, so maybe I can read some of them. So the first question is from Marian Angeles. So will the cost be focused in offshore wind farms in Denmark or global?
It will be global, but of course I know more, or the teachers know more about offshore wind farm development in Denmark, so that's why we have examples from Denmark. But in general, the teachers are not Danish. I think I'm the only Dane in the course. Maybe we are two, and the others come from other countries. So we will definitely bring in examples internationally as well.
Okay, good. There's another question from Lucas. So would the modeling of a layout optimization also be part of this course?
Briefly, yes, but it will, if you want to dig deeper into layout optimization of offshore wind farms, I can recommend
Niels Erik, yeah, he seems frozen. Maybe we wait a bit for him to come back. Maybe I can answer some of the questions. So some question ask, how do we measure the wind before planning and to set up the wind farm? Yes, this course will briefly touch about this topic, and also we have a similar course will mainly focus on assess the wind resources. Like there's a course called wind resources, so it's mainly focusing on how to calculate the AEP, the annual energy production for the site. So yes, we have some courses to cover that. Yes, the next question from Chatinya is about in the site planning, in the bathymetry, there's a wide variation in the water depth in the sea. So that is in the blue and black color. So we need to go for floating wind farm. Why so? So the question is, why do we need? So for the black area, I think the water depth is too deep. That's why we cannot put the foundation into the really deep water. So that's why we need to go for floating. And I think for water depth up to 50 meters, below 50 meters, then we can put a fixed foundation. So that's the answer. There's a question from Air Center. Okay, there's a question about the online class. Do I need to attend the lessons live? No, you don't need to attend the lessons live. Basically the program. If you attend the course, so you will have a pre-recording lecture, so you can watch the pre-recorded lecture anytime you want. So it's like some videos, and also the teacher will give you some reading materials, and then there will be Q&A sections every week. So basically you just attend the Q&A, and if you have questions, then you attend the Q&As, then the teacher will help you. And if you don't have questions, you don't need to attend the Q&A. And then you also need to do the assignments, so 3 to 4 assignments, and then after that you will do an exam. And it's completely online, so you don't need to come to Denmark or anything like that. And also you can study whenever you want, because we understand we are full-time professionals, so we have families and work, and so you can study anytime. Yeah. Okay, Niels Erik is back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. My computer decided to restart.
Okay, maybe we can go to the next question. Yeah, next question is from Yaya. So he asking about, do you have any ideas about the wind map in Saudi Arabia, like Gulf Sea and Red Sea?
Yes, the Global Wind Atlas is covering globally. As I mentioned, it's a screening tool, and it's covering both on land as well as 200 kilometers from the coast. And it is, of course, a screening tool. So it's not accurate enough so that you can finance your project, but you can definitely use it to make some sketch projects.
Okay. Next question is from anonymous attendee. So he's asking, where can we find marine spatial plans of other locations different to Denmark and Germany?
That's a very good question. Because this is something that is different from country to country. In EU, there is a directive that is, let's say, mandating all countries to create marine spatial plans, but outside the EU, it's being done more, let's say, ad hoc. So it's where and which authority is responsible for it is actually different from country to country. So you need to ask some authorities in that country, do we have a marine spatial plan and where do I find it? It's hard to say in general.
Yes. The next question from Kent. So at offshore wind farm, do you have no-go zone around for fishing?
Sometimes we have, often we don't actually. For instance, in the Danish marine spatial plan, the fishermen commented on the final plan, but they did not want to release which fishing grounds they were using today. First of all, because it's probably changing from year to year, and also a good fisherman will never release the secret of where he's catching his fish, because this is a commercial secret. So they don't want to share always. This is different from country to country. So, but in Denmark, they still commented on it on the marine spatial plan, and there are some areas where we know are good fishing grounds. One of the things we have to be aware of is that good fishing grounds are often shallow areas, and when we construct offshore wind farms, we also like shallow areas for obvious reasons.
Okay. Yeah, next question is about the course from Shahar. So will the course be theory oriented, or are there projects to be done as well?
It will be very practical, actually, Sahar. So you will develop your own project, and you will consult with us, the teachers, when you do it. So you will actually end up having a draft design of your first offshore wind farm in a country you have selected yourself. So it will be quite practical, but we will give you all the tools you need.
Maybe we can go back to the first question. So there's a anonymous attendee asking, how do we measure the wind before planning to set up the wind farm?
First, we start by looking at the global wind atlas. As you could see, the example I showed from the Black Sea, you can already see that there's a relatively good wind resource, not as good as in the North Sea. But in order to make it bankable so that you can finance it, you need at least some months, preferably years of measurements on the site, which we often do nowadays with floating lidars. So we place a floating measurement instrument for some time and measure the wind speeds in hop height.
Thanks. There's a question from Zoom user. So he's asking, is it about the cost? Is it necessary to have an engineering degree to do the course?
I think this course you can do if you have. I mean, we have had economists doing the course, definitely with luck. But I have also had a real estate dealer doing this course, and people with social science background can also do the course. I mean, I think, but maybe in that case you need to work a little harder, just as a disclaimer. But it's not very heavy on engineering, and there's no programming involved in this course, for instance.
Okay, the next question is also about the field. So it's from Aisha. So how can we as a physicist collaborate this field, or is it only for engineer?
I think physicists are definitely also a very relevant background to have as a course participant, because you know all the laws of natural science. So yes, what we see in our department, where Alan and we are employed, is that physicists, they are employed, for instance, with atmospheric modeling, weather forecasts, and things like that, but also in other areas. So you can definitely find an area where you can use your knowledge and your skills, for sure.
Okay, the next question is back to the presentation, is from Paul. So it's about EIA. So does the EIA include regulations from the EU, or are they purely Danish national regulations?
I think the EIA part is quite generic. So we don't look a lot into the legislation, because first of all, it is different from country to country, and it's also changing in time. So we try to look at it at a little bit, let's say, generic level, which in this case, it will be valid for many countries. But of course, some of the examples come from Denmark or from the EU. But I have also examples from Taiwan and from the US, from UK, yeah, from other countries that we have worked in.
Okay. Niels Erik, maybe you can look into the Q&A to see which one you're interested to answer, because we receive a lot of questions.
That's good. I think there's a question here from Muhib. Can we utilize wind energy in large scale like other renewable energy, such as hydro and solar? And I would say yes. Yes, we can. The plan is that offshore wind will cover a lot of EU's electricity consumption. Nowadays, it's only covering approximately 2 to 3% of EU's electricity consumption, but I think we have plans that it should be covering way more, like 20, 30% of the electricity consumption of the EU. Yes, so the answer is yes.
Yes, there's a question from Benjamin. what can you tell us about the intermittency of offshore wind plants? Do you have any numbers, percentage as comparison to onshore one?
I don't think we will touch upon that in this course. So I don't have any numbers. I can say a general thing is that the wind resource generally is better offshore than on land. And this is one of the reasons why we build wind farms offshore and not on land. And I can also say that we have very few days in the North Sea where there is no wind. We had a couple of days, maybe 1 week, 10 days ago, where we had 2 days in a row with nearly no wind and high electricity prices, but it's quite rare.
Thanks. There's a very interesting question from Matt. What are the career scope if we compare it from onshore?
Career possibilities?
Yeah, it could be, yes.
Is that what Matt is thinking of?
I think it's about taking this course, maybe after this course, what's the career possibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say if you're prepared to travel, you have a lot of options. Although for the time being, offshore wind is a little bit in a, let's say, a limbo for the time being because of rising prices on materials and components and supply chain issues, and at the same time a higher discount rate in many countries. So, but still, there's a huge potential for working in this area in many parts of the world, and we see a lot of interest from many different countries in building offshore wind farms. So I would see the options as being good.
Yes. There's also another question about the course. So, what is the time frame of the course for the spring semester?
Yeah, we'll start the 2nd of February, and then every week we open up a new topic that you can study yourself, and it runs for 13 weeks, including the guest lecture towards the end. And we have then the oral exam in May, mid-May, so to say. So from February to mid-May. And the time, I think you have mentioned that already, Alan, but typically you should expect to use like 8, 9, perhaps 10 hours a week maximum on this totally, including the time where we have live Q&As.
Yes, there's a question from Hussein. So between the two types of offshore wind farms, the floating and fixed, which would be considered a better option from a financial and practical perspective? So floating or fixed offshore wind farm?
Yeah, that's a, let's say, a $100 or $1,000 question, of course. Usually, if you can't do bottom fixed, do that because it's known technology, less risk, and also less expensive than floating winds. So there is a reason why we don't have so many floating offshore wind farms yet. It's mostly demonstration projects, and the specific cost of capital investment per megawatt is significantly higher than bottom-mounted offshore wind. And it's very depending on the distance to shore and distance to the seabed, water depth.
Okay. The next question is about the wake model. Do you touch the wake model in this course?
We do briefly, yes. Our my wind resource colleague will touch upon how to model the wake models, but we will not actually do it in this course. For that one, you need to take the wind resource course, because there we will introduce you to the models and you will have a chance to try them. And also in the numerical tools course, you will be able to work with these wake models even more.
Yes. Speaking of tools, there's a student asking, once they involve in this course, can they use the software by DTU? Um, so our in-house tools.
Yes, for this course, we will use mostly the Global Wind Atlas, which is freely available for everyone. So that you can already try before the course if you want to see. So we are not using any tools, to my knowledge, that where you need a license. This is some of the other courses, like in the numerical tools course.
Yes, in numerical tools. Yes, you
Yeah,
can use Hawk2 and also ellipsis. Yeah.
yeah, and WASP.
Yeah, and WASP.
But in this course, we do not use any licensed tools.
Okay. So for the time being, maybe Niels Erik, you can pick two more questions you answer, and then for the rest, we answer by emails or by other means.
Should I pick a couple of
Yes, the one
questions?
you find interesting. Yes.
I can see here is how do we see HVDC tech applied to offshore wind farms? This is something that we will touch upon in the course. When are we considering high voltage DC and when are we considering high voltage AC? What are the characteristics of these two and pros and cons? This was to an anonymous question. And let's see if I can find another question. Now I can take the ones that I can answer. Boom, boom. I think some of them are very detailed. What is the data validation process for Global Wind Atlas? I can say a few words about that because it's all done by modeling. However, the Global Wind Atlas is validated against mast measurements for a number of countries. And the person that is teaching here will know which countries it is validated and which it is not. So every time we work with some projects in a country, for instance, South Africa or Mauritius or China or other countries that we have worked in, we try to validate the modeling that was done here against measurements. And then we issue new versions of the Global Wind Atlas so that it will gradually become more and more accurate. So that's why the tool is improving over time. But it's not validated in every single country over the world today. That's also, I can add. I think that was two questions, Alan, or should I take one more?
Yeah, if you want. Yes. If you found one interesting, yes.
Yeah, if I find one that I can answer.
Yep.
Here's a question from Amam that wants to know in which section there are more job opportunities, like if I do my specialization in lidar control, or if I go with loads and dynamics or mechanical components in perspective of offshore. I think I would say it's hard to say. I would recommend you to go with your interest, because if you go with the things you find interesting and funny and gives you a lot of let's say interesting jobs, you will also be good at it and you will be able to find a job in that area. So this is a better way because market conditions can change overnight. So go with your interest. And I think that should be the last one. It's also a good way of ending that you should definitely, when you select your project, go with your interests and talk to Alan or me or another teacher to find a good and interesting topic for your thesis.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. So, okay. So thank you, Niels Erik, for the really interesting talk and very insightful. And also thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. And we will send you follow-up emails after this webinar and including the recordings. So thank you and have a nice evening or nice afternoon or nice morning.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining and thank you for staying. Hope to see you in spring.
Thanks.